Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life. I'm your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. It's first and foremost in everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. I'm very grateful to God for everything that I have and all the experience that I've had. A little bit about me and the podcast. I started the podcast because I wanted to be able to put out information from a real-world experience, real-world perspective. So, a little bit about me. I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting at a very early age. I've hunted everything from gray squirrels on the East Coast to big giant elk on the West Coast and wolves and bear and all manner of things. I've been very blessed there. I started shooting, as I said, at a very early age. I did my first formal shooting competition in 1998. I've won gold medals and state championships and regional championships and rifle and pistol. And a lot of different disciplines, everything from what you'd consider like more precision Olympic style rifle to steel challenge pistol, which is basically drag racing with a pistol and everything in between. I've been very blessed to win more competitions than I can remember. I don't win them all, but I've won quite a few. I'm very blessed. And joined the Marine Corps at 17, did 2 combat tours in Iraq in the infantry, which if you don't know, that's like professional gunfighting. 101 Marine Corps infantry. By God's grace, I made it back alive and I'm able to share stuff with you and thoughts and opinions formed in that arena with you guys. I was there for the initial invasion and some of the crazier times after that in like 05-ish. And then I also served in the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard on a couple of different states, a couple of different MOSs. Most of them combat arms. Let's see what else. After the Marine Corps, I went to work for LAPD. I worked some of the nastiest streets in the country, carrying a gun, and by God's grace, again, made it back in one piece to share those experiences. I worked regular assignments and some more specialized assignments for LAPD and other police agencies and some interagency task force. I'm a professional firearms instructor, FBI certified, a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications, NRA certified. I've been a professional firearms instructor at some of the biggest and most prestigious academies in the country. If I said, you would know what I was talking about. But they're not affiliated with the podcast, so I'll leave them out. My day-to-day job is as the commander of a tactical team or response team. So gunfighting is very much part of day-to-day life for us. And I won't say who they are or what metropolitan area I work in because they're not affiliated with this podcast. But just know that gunfighting is very much still part of life for us. And especially with today's crazy times and all the rioting and looting and civil unrest that's going on and a bunch of other things. So I'm here to share those experiences with you. Today's is going to be part 2 of survival guns. We're going to talk about, if you didn't listen to the first one, you might want to go back and listen to it. It's the ultimate survival gun, so go back and listen to that. But today I'm going to call the close runner-up the 22 long rifle. I'm still going to talk about long guns today. I'm going to talk about the 22 long rifle in a rifle, not in a pistol. But I'll consider the 22 long rifle the second best survival tool. And again, this is going to be a series. We're not talking about specific applications like hiking or things like that. We're talking about a broad survival tool. A survival gun, and you don't know what the survival situation is going to be. So I'm gonna put that out there as a caveat. There may be, obviously there's specific situations where one gun will be favored over another, but I'm talking about all around survival. Maybe urban environment, maybe backpacking, maybe escape and evasion, maybe all manner of different things. Who knows? Maybe you're just bugging out and getting from one place to another. So I would submit that the 22 is the second best. What the 22 has going for it, the ammo is very light, and that's really one of the big advantages. The gun we talked about yesterday, the shotgun, I'm basically limited to probably, if I'm mobile, less than 100 rounds of ammo. I can easily, with the 22, put 1,000 rounds of ammo on my person and not be weighed down. And 1,000 rounds of ammo is probably more than you're ever going to need. Short of like leaving and going out in the wilderness forever, you're probably going to get resupplied or restocked or find ammo 1,000 rounds is a lot of ammo. And you could carry, let's say, 300 rounds in little sleeves and it would weigh almost nothing. And the 22 rifle itself can be very light. I mean, obviously you can get all different configurations and make them very heavy, but just your general from Walmart off the rack 22 is going to be pretty light, and south of 5 pounds. And you can get them much lighter than that. And that gives you a tremendous amount of ammunition and ability for not a lot of weight. And if you've ever done anything, I didn't mention my bio, but I've done quite a bit of like wilderness hiking and I've mentioned hunting, but literally going out into the wilderness with a gun and with a Bible and a gun and being very blessed to be able to put food on the table, as they say. And I've done that, and I've done a lot of different what you'd call survival scenarios. And the 22, that weight cannot be understated. If you're traveling long distance over land in rough terrain, there's a big difference between a 6.5 pound rifle and a 3.5 pound rifle. And you may say, oh, it's only a couple pounds, but when you're trying to not just get from one place to another, but do it quickly, and not be fatigued, because if you're fatigued, you're more likely to lose in a gunfight or to not notice something that's important to notice, like the edge of a cliff coming up or a rattlesnake or something like that. So fatigue is a real thing in the real world. If you get off the couch and get off of YouTube or whatever and get in the real world, fatigue is a thing, and 22s are lighter. So now, I'll be honest, when I do my wilderness excursions and I have to feed myself, I take the shotgun because it's more versatile. But like I said, there have been times, especially in the desert where there's not a lot of big game, where I will take the 22. So there's that. The 22 I would submit is the runner-up for the best all-around survival weapon. I would say that it's second to the shotgun, but not by much, and there's several advantages where you might pick it over. Like I said, if your main goal is not to hunt and forage for food, or your main goal is not for defense to protect yourself, but you just want to get from one place to another and you need something light and mobile, then yeah, you may favor the 22, and that's fine. 22s, now I don't think it should be a primary consideration. If you have the money, you should spend the money to get the best tool for the job. But I would rather you have a 22 and a bunch of ammo for it and train with it and know how to use it, and then if you need it, you have a 22 and a couple hundred rounds of ammo and you're very good with it, than a super awesome $2,000 AR-15 that you're saving up for that you don't have anything when you need it. So 22s are affordable, and even when you get that super high-end AR, the 22 is great. You've heard my background, you've heard my bio. I do a lot of shooting, and I do most of my shooting training with a 22. I have 22s that are the same as my duty gun, more or less. Not exactly the same, obviously, but the same grip angles, the same. I configure them so that they're very conducive to switching back and forth in training. And obviously I shoot a lot, and if I'm going to shoot a lot, I'd rather shoot a lot with the 22 because it's cheaper. And unless it's specifically recoil control, I can do all my practicing, my draws, my target transitions, my failure drills, two to the chest, one to the head. I can do all that stuff with the 22, and I can save money. And if I can, and I can shoot, I don't think, unless you're a millionaire out there listening to me, there's a limit to how much ammo you can buy. I guess even a millionaire would have a limit. But if I can train with 500 rounds of 22, I'd rather do that than train with 50 rounds of 9mm. So, or 100 rounds of 9mm even. And then just confirm everything every once in a while with my primary duty gun, which is an STI 2011. I'm very blessed to have a few that are my primary duty guns. When it comes to training, I do it with the 22. So back to survival with the 22. If you can get out and train with it all the time, you're better off with a 22 where you can make good consistent hits at a golf ball sized target at 50 yards, standing, kneeling, prone, and you're very well versed in it, than an AR that you never take out and shoot because it's too expensive or too loud or too whatever. I'd rather you have a gun that you're familiar with and that you shoot a lot, and 22s let you do that. Another thing I just touched on is that 22s are generally, they're not quiet, but they're quieter than a center fire rifle most of the time. Especially if you get a very long barrel 22. They can be very quiet, and compared to other things, even a shotgun, much quieter. They won't be silent. Even with a silencer, it's not like Hollywood. Things aren't silent, but they're much quieter. So in a suburban survival scenario where you might have to take a shot on something to feed yourself and get out of there without being noticed, the 22 is quieter than most other guns. I'm talking about in a rifle, they're still pretty loud in a handgun. The 22 is deadly. Lots of people are killed with 22s. And I'm not advocating it as your primary defensive gun, but if need be, it can be pushed into that role. There's been enough people killed with 22s that nobody can argue that a 22 is not deadly. Is it ideal? No. But we're not talking about ideal. We're talking about a good all-around survival weapon. And let's face it, you're probably more likely to have to feed yourself than get in a defensive situation. You've heard my background, and like I said in the podcast before, I can count the number of gunfights I've been in on my hands and my fingers and have a few left over. And that's, by God's grace, a lot more than most people will ever need to get in. But even in those experiences, no matter how many that is, even if you've had more than me, you've had to feed yourself far more. You have to feed yourself every day. And the 22 is great because as much as people fantasize and love to deer, and I love to deer hunt and elk hunt and everything, if you're, especially in a survival situation where you're probably moving, you're much more likely to get that small game on a Tweety bird or, a rabbit or a chipmunk or whatever. And the 22 is okay for that. It's not as good as a shotgun. Yes, it's as good at killing those things, but a lot of times if you're moving, you get shots on the wing or on the jump, a jump shot, and a shotgun's better for that, but a 22 will do it. So I'd say for those situations, a 22 is okay. And a 22 is not great for deer, but with a good solid headshot, there's been enough deer killed like that you can't say that it's not effective. So 22 can be very effective. It can be pushed into a defensive role, but it's nowhere near as good as the shotgun, which is one of the reasons it gets a second tier for me. I'm going to say if you're going to get a 22 for all-around survival, I love bolt-action 22s. I got nothing against single-shot 22s or lever-action 22s, but if you're going to have an all-around survival gun, because it's limited in power, the 22 long rifle, it's got to be semi-auto. Obviously, my hat goes to the 1022. I have a 1022 that I bought when I was a kid. Had my mom go to Walmart and buy it for me. I still have it. I still shoot it. In fact, it's in my wife's trunk. It's kind of her go-to gun. It's one of her favorites, and she's good and familiar with it. I have a lot of big guns and battle rifles, an M1A and a SCAR. I'm very blessed to have those things. She shoots a 22 and she likes it, and she's good and accurate with it. So that's her go-to. And I practice what I preach. I'd rather her have a gun that she shoots and is familiar with it than a gun than some super fancy gun that she never shoots and doesn't know the dope and doesn't know how to load it and unload it. So it's a real world example. Carries a 22 in her trunk with a brick of ammo and some ammo in there. I also have a 1022 takedown that I like and I sell, and I sometimes take it second to the shotgun, but sometimes if I'm just going out to scout an area and hike and I may shoot some small game, especially in the desert where there's not a lot of big game, I'll take the 1022 takedown. It's great for that. It's as accurate as my standard 1022 all-weather. It's a great gun. It's a takedown. It's a semi-auto. And the reason I say the semi-auto is that if you had to push it into defensive role, one of the Russian leaders said that quantity has a quality all its own. So if you have to push it into a defensive role, you can put a lot of fast, accurate rounds on target with the 22. And several 22 long rifles into an adversary is preferable to one or two that you might get with a bolt action. Gunfights happen quick in the real world, and having that semi-auto capability, I'd say, is a must. And in the 22, you can get semi-autos that are very accurate, as accurate as I don't know if as accurate as a bolt action, but in practical real world senses, in real world environments, for the shooter, as far as the shooter's capability is concerned, they're very accurate. And if you spend the money, they can be as accurate as anything else. I would say the 1022, the regular or the takedown. They also make the Henry. I've never owned one, but the Survival 22 semi-auto would be a great choice. It's very light. It's not as shootable. I've never owned one, and I try to talk from experience, but I can just tell by looking at it and from my experience, It doesn't have a fore end. You have to grab it on the barrel, and it takes quite a bit longer to put together than the 1022, but it is far lighter. So you may look at that Air Force AR-7, I believe, survival rifle 22. The Air Force obviously chose it for all the reasons we mentioned today. So you may look at that one. My go-to is going to be the 1022. And I like just plain iron sights. I like put a good peep sight on it if you want. The 1022 does have a pretty bad trigger from the factory. I'm not always for the guy to put super high-end triggers in my guns. I used to be, and I thought that made a huge difference, but then I realized I just needed to become a better shooter. But I will say that 1022 does not have a great trigger from the factory. So you don't have to get a super light trigger, but I would advise you getting a crisper, better trigger and just a peep sight, just a Williams sight, or I really like the ones that are like the military sights. I forget who makes them, but I have a set of Williams on one of them, peep sights, and I have the good set of military style peep sights, M1A or M1 carbine style peep sights on my other, and they're great. And I'm not going to tell you not to scope it, because if it's primarily for hunting small game, you might want to scope on it. But I like just the iron sights. They're fast, they're rugged. You can shoot in the rain, you can shoot wet, you drop them in the mud, you spray them off, they're fine. So for that, and they're plenty accurate, you can definitely get out to, on very small targets to 100 yards or more if you practice and know your holdover. Mine actually has two aperture flip-up sights, one for 50, one zeroed for 50, one zeroed for 100, and it's remarkably accurate. So I would recommend those, because that's obviously what I do, and I'm not going to recommend you do something that I don't do. But if you're going to go with the scope, I would get a good low power variable or a straight fixed 2.5 or 4 power scope. If it's for all around, don't get the crazy high magnification, because then you give up a lot of close end stuff. And if it's going to be for defense, it's probably going to be in close. So I would advise that. And one of the great things about the 22, it's affordable. I know ammo is hard to get right now, guys, but even spend a little bit more for the 22 ammo, it's still going to be cheaper than centerfire ammo, and get out there and practice. And a man that's good with his gun in practice will make up for a lot, even a lot of power in the cartridge. Don't ever think that a Magnum cartridge is going to make up for poor marksmanship, because I don't care how powerful the cartridge is. If you miss, then it doesn't matter how powerful the cartridge is. You're better off with a hit with a weak cartridge than a miss with a super powerful cartridge. You're better off hitting with a 22 long rifle than missing with a 300 Winchester Magnum. And that's just a reality. And you're probably not going out and putting a ton of rounds to a 300 Winchester Magnum. So for all those reasons, for all those things, I'd say go with the 1022. My top pick would be the Ruger 1022. Takedown if you want it, if you're going to be backpacking with it. Now realize that the takedown is nice for convenience and for carry and for hiking and stuff, but probably if you're looking for food, you're not going to have time, if you see an animal, to take it out of your pack and assemble it and load it and shoot it. Likewise with a gunfight. Gunfights in the real world, all the ones I know of, happen quickly. You're not going to have time to, you want to kill me, let me stop and assemble my gun and then get into a gunfight with you. Yeah, maybe you can run away and hide and then put your gun together, but the breakdown or the takedowns of AR-7s are not really great for that. But what they are great for is your main goal is to leave or bug out or something like that and leave the area, or hike and you have food, but something may happen, like you get lost, and which I've been lost in the woods, and then you need to get food. So they're good for that. So I would say it's 1022, the regular or the takedown. The AR-7 22 would also be an option. I would say if it's going to be all around, any 22s tend to be finicky with ammo. They can be very reliable, but generally they like one kind of ammo over another. I would advise you, if it's for all around survival and shooting, I like copper plated rounds. I don't like the straight lead rounds. I do shoot so much that I have literally plugged up barrels and caused rounds to shave off in the barrel and come out in pieces. That's a real thing, and that generally happens a lot less. You can go a lot higher round count with copper plated rounds. I would stay away from, I'm not going to mention brands to stay away from on this podcast, but some are better than others. I really like the CCIs. I really like their clean fire. They're polymer coated, and one of the reasons for that, I really like the CCI mini mags, but they're covered in wax, and I live in a very hot climate, and especially if they're going to stay in the car, when you take them out, all that wax and stuff has dripped off some, dripped on some. It's like not evenly coated, and it's never been an issue, but I just don't like that. The Clean Fire are polymer coated, and I like those. If it's for straight hunting, I like the CCI Mini Mag hollow points. They're great. Be advised on small game, hollow points, obviously they do work. They do expand out of a rifle. So you may want to favor those, but if you're going to eat the thing, like a small squirrel or a small rabbit or a small bird, the hollow points can really kind of tear them up. So you may even want to stay away from them and do less damage if that's your goal. And obviously, every time a projectile expands, it gets less penetration. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about what kind of ammo to use for the 22. But the CCI mini mags are kind of the standard, and they're great. I like the new Clean Fires. They're loaded about the same, but they have a polymer coating. So I'd say those are great too. But right now, ammo is hard to get. Just get it and run it in your gun and make sure that it runs. Like I said, any gun can be finicky with different kinds of ammo, even Glocks. Yes, even Glocks can malfunction, but especially 22s, and especially they might like one kind of ammo over another. Semi-autos, I found in general, tend to like high-velocity rounds, so keep that in mind. Real quick in closing, there are also things called the 22 short and the long, and there's also a 22 Colibri, which is very weakly loaded. It probably won't cycle in your semi-auto, but they can be very quiet in a rifle. So another thing you might want to think of for a survival situation where you're trying to evade and escape and be quiet, you can single load them even in a 10-22. So you may look at the Colibris if you're trying to be super quiet. 22s are also easily suppressed. Obviously, obey all laws. So there's that. And in closing, guys, I hope you're never in a actual survival situation or a gunfight. But if you are, hopefully this knowledge helps you. Thanks, and have a blessed day.